Hi, everybody. Welcome to Book 2, Night 23 of the Orphan Tales Live Quarantine Reading Series. We are listening to S.J. Tucker. Really, as always, in Cat World, we are listening to S.J. Tucker. Thank you, everybody who came to our concert. It was so amazing. There were so many of you. It was such a wonderful journey back in time to a long, long ago country where we didn't have to think about a lot of the things that we think about now. It was really special, and I'm really grateful for everybody who came, and thank you to everyone who contributed and hung around in the chat and got little bits of fiction and audio and all the other good stuff we had in the tip rewards. It was just the coolest event. Yeah, it was awesome. Boy, a lot's changed since we talked last on Wednesday night. Who knew 1 a.m. on a Thursday could be so exciting? Don't take my smile to be, an indication of me being a bad person. I just enjoy people experiencing consequences. Good, bad, indifferent, just consequences. It's a good thing. I enjoy that in this world. Sip that drink like Kermit, but that's none of my business. So it's all happening, I guess. Everything's real weird. I feel like nobody's in charge of our country, so hopefully nobody tries to break into the house while mom and dad are gone. I don't know who mom is in this scenario, but it's weird. Not okay. I don't really have anything else to say about that. I think he's probably a lot worse than he's letting on. But what are you going to do? I'm watching old episodes of West Wing and trying my best. That was SJ's song about what we read last week with the mice and the costume. I would have hyped last week a little bit more if I had read ahead and seen that we were going to hit that, which showed you how unprofessional I am. How unprofessionally I have been rolling with this because I didn't check ahead. I just feel like you deserve as spontaneous a performance as possible. Another thing about my professionalism is that I just found out that here on Instagram Live, here on Al Gore's internet on Instagram Live, there's a button I could have been pushing this entire time to make myself look more beautiful. I could have been doing it since March. I could have been way prettier on all these things that I have slapped up on YouTube, hours and hours of my dumb face reading, and I could have been way prettier. And I didn't. I was authentic. Also, I didn't know about it. So here's that face again. I feel slightly less bad about having bought a ring light. That is not nearly as much cheating as the auto filter on Instagram Live. I don't even know. Let's get into it. Let me do my intro spiel, and then we'll start reading. I also cut my bangs really poorly so that I could see you guys a little bit better. But I'm very bad at cutting my own bangs, so they aren't even. All right. So, as always, little bunny foo-foo. This is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This is a play. You can find music based on these books, and you gotta know this by now, at sjtucker.com. You can buy copies of them at your local independent booksellers. They have them in every city. I know you know about them. Please buy books from them. Buy my books, buy other people's books, just anything so that they can survive this. If you want to help mine, it is printbookstore.com in Portland, Maine. You can find me on Twitter, howling into the void and hoping for the sweet release of an asteroid at Catherynne Valente. You can find me on Patreon at Catherynne Valente. A new essay going up there next week, so get on it. And also, the first chapter of the space opera sequel is going to go up on Patreon next week. So if you want to read Space Oddity before it comes out, or at least portions of it, you should be subscribing to my Patreon. What comes next? You can catch up in the archive at Cat Valente Live on YouTube. And you can ask me questions when the reading is over. It does work better if you think about them before I finish reading, so that we don't have any awkward dead air. But, we usually do have awkward dead air. So really, I don't know why I keep saying that. Don't worry about it. The lipstick is Maybelline Stay Matte. something like that. It's the square tube. In Artiste, the sound that you are hearing just now is my dog barking. She's angry that I'm talking to someone who's not her. And oh yes, if you would like to help out an artist and a freelancer during this very tight time, and the beautiful beginning of the month that we all know and love so well, please feel free to leave a tip in the tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, or on my website, which is CatherynneValente.com. It is just gross as we enter the last portion of the year for all of us, and anything that you can give really helps. It is quite a lot to have spent the better part of 2020 reading out loud to you guys at night. But you don't have to. This is just for you and me. I was going to say something. Oh, yes. And Jen and Mandy, who tipped me last week. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Like, I cannot even begin to tell you what that means. You literally bought my son shoes because he's outgrown every pair of shoes that he has. And I got yelled at daycare because his shoes don't fit. And so Jen and Mandy bought my son new shoes. And that should tell you just how much it means when somebody puts even a nickel in that jar. Thank you so much, guys. You're amazing. And Sebastian's feet. Thank you. All right, that's it. I'm gonna have another sip of this. This is a screwdriver, which is gross. I don't even really like it, but I'm all alone because he's been working a lot of nights, so he's asleep, so that he can start working at midnight. Sebastian's asleep, and Jed Bartlett is currently ailing from multiple sclerosis. So I'm gonna sip my gross drink, but we don't have anything else. I hate screwdrivers, disgusting, but that's all we got. It's either that or just give up and start drinking straight from the bottle. If we can't, somebody say, if we can't watch you pre-Pretty Button, we don't deserve you at Pretty Button. I mean, I feel like that's fair. I just kind of resent that I didn't know that button existed until now. Like, I could have looked so nice for you guys, and I just looked, my regular hangdog self. So thanks a lot, Instagram, for not making that clear. I see some familiar faces. Hi, Emily. Hi, Rabbit. I love you guys. Thanks for coming and watching. You guys are great. I don't know. I guess I'm in a slightly better mood than usual tonight. I'm not actually in a good mood because Trump's in the hospital. Like, you might think that that's why. It's not. I don't know. I like autumn. Autumn is really nice. I have real hope that my son will like pumpkin pie. Because my husband hates pumpkin pie. He'll say he doesn't hate it, but he does. He says, oh no, it's good, but I'd literally rather have any other pie. He doesn't like it. I'm hoping Sebastian likes it, so I'm going to make a pumpkin pie this week. It's going to happen. So maybe that's what's putting me in a decent mood. Or it could be that I already had makeup on because I did a family portrait thing today. So I didn't have to go slap the analog Pretty Button on my face upstairs before doing this. Either way, let's get into our Oops, All Firebirds portion of the Orphan Tales. Look how close we are to the end, you guys. We might even do it by Halloween. Maybe, but that's not very much. It's less than 100 pages left to go, or just slightly over 100. Yeah, slightly over 100 pages. We are on page 405. For those of you following along at home, what will I do with myself when I am done doing this? I don't know. I am in a good mood because of the concept. That might even be it. It was just really nice. It was really nice to perform with a friend. I remember Friends. Used to be a thing between humans that we did. I don't know. There's this Asimov book. I can never remember which book it was. One of the Foundation books where there's a whole society where they don't actually have any in-person contact. They all just visit each other through holograms and things like that. And it's the height of rudeness to turn up to see anyone in person. And I felt like we were headed toward that with how much my generation is terrified of phone calls and does not ever show up at a person's house unannounced anymore anyway. And now we are whatever that culture is. I can never remember it. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Halloween finale. Look, we may be able to pull it off. In another week or two, I'll have a better idea. But I mean, we're doing it twice a week. We do about 20 pages every night. So that might do it. Might do it with 100 pages left. All right. The one with the magic doors. Yes. I don't remember what it is. Anyway, all right. Oh, there's that 41-year-old digestive system. Maybe I'm in too good a mood. I'm telling you about my digestive system. All right, we are 11 minutes into this and I haven't started yet. Let's go. Let's get ready to Firebird. Okay. The tale of the cage of ivory and the cage of iron continued. Obviously, it grew back again, I said, eyeing his full, thick tail, glowing cheerfully in the dark. It lit the room like a hearth. Obviously, he said. But this place hurt you so. Why would you stay? And in that same cushioned cage? What a morbid beast you must be. He laughed quietly so as not to wake the child. At first I was afraid to leave, to go back into this strange city with its empty streets and alien sounds. I cowered here. I kept eating mice. But finally I peeked out the door and I saw the parish overtaken by all these saints of Agenab who stayed and danced in the ruins. I know something about that, and so I went to dance as well. In the carnival of the dawn I am the sun's best blaze, and in my flames the city sees each day born again. I am not a phoenix, but I do my best. You act as though you do it all by yourself. The child sat up suddenly, long hair tumbling around her face, her arms crossed over her chest, glaring at the great Firebird. Well, I did, my little dark-eyed darling, before you came along. Lantern looked up at me, his golden eyes bright with pride. Children change everything, don't you know? The child, and I could see her clearly now, was extraordinarily beautiful. Her eyes were wide and clear, and brown as good kindling, her hair braided loosely, long and soot black, her nose fine and flared, her chin cut sharply as a gem. I do not know very much about human children. She was certainly no woman grown yet, but she was not a baby either, and I saw corded muscles in her arms. I could certainly believe she danced. Winding up her right arm and one side of her chest, covered in minimal fashion by scraps of red cloth, were intricate tattoos, painstakingly pricked into her skin. The long, forked black outline of a dancing flame, painted all the way up to her neck and licking at her cheek. We have an illustration here of our lovely girl. Still, I mumbled, she cannot be your daughter. Those are not true flames. She is no true child of yours. The girl narrowed her eyes at me, full of hate and disdain. What do you know? She hissed. Who are the parents of plain, smelly smoke? He is my papa, as true as anything you've ever known in your life. Lantern looked uncomfortable. Perhaps it is time, he said miserably. Perhaps I have indulged you, like a little mouse. The child looked stricken, her eyes filling with tears as easily as a child's will. She came back, you see. After all that time, she came back to me. The tale of the cloak of feathers continued. I had learned to dance in the carnival, and all my feathers were full again. The cloak was closed safely away, and I owed fealty to no one. It was almost as though none of it had happened, almost as though I had never seen the world through a cage. But I could not quite bear to take the cage down, to dash its bars and tear up the blue cushions. I told myself that it reminded me of what happens when a thief is not careful. For did not all this begin in Ravisia's orchard, when I was so careless as to be caught with my mouth full of cherries? But I think the truth is I was afraid of it, as though it were a living thing that had swallowed me up for all those years and still too dreadful to approach. So it was that I was roosting in the ruins of the bell when she came. I heard her coming up the stairs, a slow shuffle, a panting. When I think on it now, I know it must have been so hard for her to climb those steep and winding steps. But climb she did and stood before me, radiant and sorrowing and old, older than I had imagined, being but a silly bird who thought she would be just the same as when I knew her, just the same as before. This is the folly of all lovers, I suppose. My goose was there. Silver hair, a little coat of goose feathers and long grey skirts. My Airy, whom I had loved so long ago, when she was a spellbound goose and I did not know what a cage was. My Airy so long lost. She did not need to speak. I knew her even walking in that ridiculous woman's body. But what was not ridiculous about that moment? An old woman and a bird, as though a goose and a firebird were not impossible enough. She had passed beyond all possibility of touch, of nesting, of flight, of the sky, and of me. I laughed, a hoarse, barking, anguished sound. We stood facing each, swallowing slowly how far we had come from each other. In her arms, she held a baby, wrapped in grey cloth and scraps of fur. But I hardly saw it for seeing her. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I didn't ask to get old or grow arms and legs. I would have been happy just to stay with you. But you wouldn't let me. My feather. Oh, I know, my darling bird, I know. We could neither of us help it. Ours was a very sad story. Perhaps the bedraggled opera down there will perform it one of these days. But being a woman is not so bad. And if I had stayed a goose, I would not have lived long enough to find you. Geese are brief creatures, and often silly." She told me then all that she had done since we parted, how she had known stars and passed out of the world and in again, how she had delivered the star's child and borne it out of the dark. I told her of the spider and the mice, and the star at the heart of the city. We would have let our adventures pool between us all night, but the child in her arms awoke and began to squall. She gave it her knuckle to suck, and it quieted a bit. She looked up at me through her wispy hair, which was, in her old age, not unlike long, thin feathers. "I brought her for you, all this way. Child, you wanted chicks so much when I flew with you. You wanted them more than you wanted me. When this little thing first tugged at my hair, I knew where she would be safe. I knew you would look after her. I knew you would want her. She's not a chick. She has no feathers and no beak, and she will never fly. But then neither will I any longer." I looked at the swaddled girl, her big dark eyes blinking sleepily at me, her shock of black hair like burnt grass. She was not very much like a firebird, but my heart was always gentle, and when the tiny thing reached out with her chubby red hand to clutch my arm, my warm bronze beak, and I heard her laugh, I remembered all my cousin's orange eggs. I remembered the ash nest and the desert trees, and I knew that poor orphan for my own, my solace, my hatched egg, my girl. "I would have come looking," I began, "and you would never have found me. She's beautiful. I know." Airy, businesslike and brisk, sniffed a little and began to root through the broken planks and bolts of silk and shining things the mice had left to find enough shards to make a cradle. While she searched, I sang quietly to the child, and she gurgled along with me after a while. Picture of the cradle here. It was nearly morning when the cradle was finished, a ramshackle but strangely pretty thing resting on two long golden cello bows, and rounded shards of bell built of red wood and stone, bedded in the weaver's cloth and hooded with the lid of a chest that had once held piles of coins which had caught the mice's magpie glance. She laid the child inside and went back to the cloth to cut a blanket. "Wait," I cried suddenly, and dashed up the rafters, making the whole tower creak and shake. I pulled out my cloak of feathers from the space in the wall where I had closed it away, unable to look at it, unable to remember without terrible pains in my tail. I flew down, golden cloak trailing behind me like kite cloth. With this we swaddled our girl. With this we tucked her into her dreams. And that black-haired dear slept in my down, all those golden feathers gleaming round her face like sunbeams. I missed the carnival that morning. Airy lay in my wings as she had once done, and we listened to the sounds of a sleeping daughter. I struggled with tears that I absolutely would not let fall on her slender shoulders. But you will not go for a while, will you? I whispered thickly. I could not bear it. This is such a lonely place. Given time, I could learn to hold this child so dear, dear as flame. Dear as any duck has held her chicks. But not without you. You must stay a while yet, for me. We shall be a family for a while. Just a little while. Airy turned to me and smiled dazzlingly like a dozen noontime suns. Of course I will stay with you, my only love, my own. And she did stay, for a little while. It was summer when she asked me. I had carried her up to the topmost rafters of the tower, and she sat there happily, kicking her feet in the air, looking out over near-empty Agenab, pointing like a little girl at the landmarks she knew, the Varenne with its colours blazing, the opera ghetto faintly singing in the distance, the square of the cinnamon star, and little Agrafena dancing tiny and dark against the light. Would you give me a feather? Airy said suddenly, squinting up at me, shading her faded eyes. Why? What could you ask of me that I would not give in a moment? I want to be able to call you whenever I wish, when I need to. Just cry out. I shall be there. Do I not jump whenever the child cries? Airy laughed. I did not like how dry and brittle her voice was, like crackling wood. Even so. I thought about it. The sun was so bright and so red, that merciless southern sun I had come to know so well. For no one else would I ever lose a single feather. But to you I would give them all, and more, my burning heart given over flaming into your hands. I craned my long neck, and the sun was caught in its loop for a moment, its glare and mine blazing together. I pulled a single long feather from my tail, tipped in sparkling blood, and let it fall into her wrinkled hands. And you know, it didn't hurt at all. The tale of the cage of ivory and the cage of iron continued. In the morning, she had disappeared as though she had never been, and I stood alone in my bell tower with a hungry daughter to feed. The firebird ruffled the girl's hair with his massive wing. I called her Solace, for so she is. My solace for an empty nest, my solace for a lost goose. Solace was crying, her little shoulders heaving horribly, her head bent low. I thought I was yours, she whispered. You are a little pumpkin seed. No, I thought I was really yours. You came from a tree, but you're a bird. The manticore comes from a fruit and looks nothing like fruit. A dragon looks like a girl when it's young. I thought I was a firebird. I thought I would sprout wings one day and fly with you, so close to the sun. I thought nothing in this world looks like its parents. I am no different. She put her arms around the great neck of her papa and wept bitterly. I'm sorry, poor dear. I ought to have told you. But I loved you so well, and you were so happy. I could not bear to tell you otherwise. Do you know, he said to me over the shaking head of his daughter, that when she could walk and jump, she ran straight into my old cage and made it her bedroom. She loved the old thing, how it swayed and swung. I piled up more cushions for her, and the minute she was bouncing and laughing inside, it didn't seem so dreadful after all. I'm just an orphan, the child said to no one in particular. No, Solace, never that. I watched the two of them, burrowed into each other, and casually patted back some of my smoke hair that threatened to overflow its basket. They slowly recalled that they were not alone. Solace hopped out of the Firebird's tail and sat on the rim of the ivory cage, looking at me intently. You're a very good listener, she said shrewdly, kicking her legs back and forth. Her right leg was blazing with the same flame tattoos all the way down to her toes. She wore a short little skirt of the same ragged red cloth as her shirt, a dancer's fluttering scarves. I can't go nearly so long without asking questions when Papa gets on about the dragon girl and old sleeve. She comes to see me sometimes, you know. Says I'm just like her, feral, not properly socialized. I asked her what proper girls do once, and she said she didn't know, but she thought that dancing like I do was probably not on the list. Probably not, I allowed. Among my people, I'm considered a matron, though I'd wager I'm no older than you in years, properly counted. I don't know what a proper queen does either, but I'm reasonably sure they don't go behind enemy lines and listen to stories, so I think we're about even in our wickedness. I smiled. Solace flinched a little at the wisps of flame between my teeth. I can tell you a story if you like, said the girl, a deep blush rising in her cheeks, but she did not cast her eyes down. I didn't imagine the lantern had taught her how to do that. The Firebird nudged her a little, pressing his warm head to her back. There's time before dawn. Proud as any father of his precious girl. Tell a battle devil a tale if you like. She giggled, a sound that from another child might very well have been precious, but hers was genuine and dear. Very well. I shall tell you how I learned to dance. The Fire Dancer's Tale. And I'll tell you that there's a mark by this, because this is what I used to read before SJ sang Firebird's Child, which we'll play in next week. By the time I was old enough to dance, Ajanab was well and truly dead. I was weary of the bell tower, but even in a city of artists, I was not brave enough, not quite yet, to go down into the streets without my papa to find out what it is a girl ought to do. Even a dead city has ghosts. I could hear them at night, howling and singing and dancing on this great red grave. I only came out to watch Papa dance at the Carnival of the Dawn. He was so beautiful, with his tail waving high and low, fluttering like a rain of stars. I wanted to stand in his tail while he danced, stomping his big claws on the courtyard, throwing his plumes black in the first light, flaring that tail like a lady's gown. I wanted to stand there and see all that fire moving around me. Listen to the sound of it. Fire makes this great roaring sound. It snarls when it spins and leaps. Did you know that? I hear that sound in my dreams. One day, I was roasting a mouse and a few dates for breakfast. Sleeve clattered up the stairs, as she'll sometimes do, grumbling and grousing as she often does. Lantern, you're raising this child to be as wild as a kitten lost in the jungle. You must let her find other little girls and learn what it is that girls like, what they eat, what they do when they're happy, what they do when they're sad. Would you have her be like me? The other spiders think my webs are strange even now. I don't like other little girls, I piped. They are silly and taller than me, and they have no flames at all. I chewed a mouse bone, and Sleeve gestured in righteous indignation. See, she's a wolf girl. I am a firebird, I insisted. I suppose I feel a bit ridiculous about that now. But you let me believe it, Papa, so I cannot be blamed for having done just as you told me. Lantern, let me take her down into the city. If she is to live here, she must learn an art, or she will be shunned. And a shunned girl cries very much. You will never hear the end. I shall take her to the calligrapher in the high shop, for that is the closest thing to a little girl I know. He has similar parts, at least. We will find out what it is that is right and proper for a girl to do. I am not a girl, I frowned. Papa, you should have told me. I should not have made such a very big fool of myself otherwise. Poor Sleeve. But true to her word, we went first to the calligrapher in the high shop with his hat of blue and buckles, and his ink-stained fingers, and his many podiums with beautiful books open to beautiful pages of writing, with pearl-handled magnifying glasses resting in their spines. What is it, Master Calligrapher, that little girls do in the way that spiders weave? Sleeve asked primly. The calligrapher coughed, for his room was very dusty, and there was dust even on his eyelashes, and said, It is right and proper for a girl to read as many books as there are bricks in the city, and then when she is finished, to begin to write new ones, which are made out of the old ones, as the city is made of those stones. Sleeve beamed at me, pleased that we had discovered the answer on our first try. So it was that I went every day for a whole month to the calligrapher's shop and read his books, which had lovely pictures in the gold leaf and letters like swans in flight. I liked the books very much, but it was so quiet in his shop. All his shutters were closed, so the vellum would not be damaged by the sun. It was terribly dark. The calligrapher squinted, his face all close to the pages. He never talked to me at all. If I stayed there much longer, I thought, I shall become as weak and thin as a book's page, and then one flick of my papa's tail will set me alight. Very politely, as politely as I knew how, I asked if I couldn't take a few of the books with me, the very sturdy ones, mind you, with not so very many golden pictures in them. Read them myself in the sunlight, or in the bell tower, or anywhere at all but that dark, dreary, dusty place. Besides, I knew to be wary of dust. My papa told me so. And the calligrapher agreed, and glad to be rid of me. I ran from his shop, 3 volumes clutched to my chest, my favourites of all his collection, the ones about lost girls and lost beasts and grotesques. And so I was sitting up against a mangrove tree, reading about saints and centaurs, when Sleeve came clattering up. What are you doing? You should be with your calligrapher. It's dark. He never spoke to me. Lantern speaks to me every day. How was I to concentrate on the books and all that silence? But he was a man. He could have taught you all you need to know about being a little girl. But he is not a little girl, I pointed out. I thought very wisely. What does he know? His books know more than he does, and I took some with me, so I think I shall be all right. Sleeve threw up 4 of her legs in disgust. How am I to become acquainted with real and actual girls? There are not so many little ones left in Ochinab. Those there are often think it is right and proper for girls to crush spiders. So we went to the creatures with which Sleeve was acquainted. We came first to the ants, their little mandibles gleaming red, and their hill a great mass of straw and stone. We think it is right and proper for a girl to enter into soldiery as soon as possible, they said in unison. No need to shelter the child. Winter is coming, lean and toothed. But there are no soldiers left in Ochinab, I pointed out. One very large ant huffed angrily and said, What nonsense! We are here. And so we went to the worms, who writhed and churned in the dry red soil. They turned over in their muck and smiled their wormy way, which is fat and white and eyeless. We think it is right and proper for a girl to die. Girls must die if worms are to feast, and we think it is extremely proper for worms to feast. I grimaced. Sleeve recoiled. Thank you for your honesty, I said, but I think we shall have to disagree. Their faceless smiles broadened. For now, I added. And so we went to the spiders. I did not want to do this, Sleeve groused, but you are dear to me. The spiders kept to their webs like acrobats determined not to touch the ground. I thought Sleeve's needles must have made them nervous, but she put on a very brave face and asked her question. The spiders only laughed, high, tinny laughter like the shaking of marsh reeds. What do you know about anything, they jeered. Spiders don't weave, they eat. They spin and hunt and catch and feed. You've always been the stupidest of us. Who ever heard of a spider weaving dresses? Associating with birds. What is wrong with you, Sleeve? You're the worst sort of maiden aunt for this child. Girls weave. You freakish, hideous thing. Girls make dresses. Girls squeal very loudly and leap about and clutch their smelling salts. Sleeve said nothing. Her body slumped, as though she had expected no more, and I could hear her sniffling against her chest. Well, I certainly leapt about then. I blew their webs into ruined threads. What do you know? I cried, kicking their silk in. Sleeve makes the most beautiful things in the world. While you sit about snickering in your ratty old webs, you know nothing. I've never made a dress in my life. She's made dozens. Does that make her a girl and I a spider? I've never smelled salt in all my days. What a stupid idea. Come, Sleeve, your cousins are the worst relations I can imagine. I cannot say I am a very well-behaved child. I cannot really say I've learned much since. Her back was straight and her steps high as we left them. As we walked, I saw that her faceted eyes had a certain gleam to them. By gently pricking my toes, she coaxed me down to the clockmaker's square, with all its clicking and shadows and tap-tap-tapping of hands against numerals. She led me to a door of all of locks, every sort of lock you can imagine, huge brass bolts to tiny, intricate silver keyholes no wider than a feather. Wooden locks with gaping slots and golden locks with birds carved into their faces, locks so old and worn that only rust was left, and locks in the shape of open, staring eyes blown from the purest glass. I put my hands against them, and the door swung open. There was no one inside. "Hello," I called, and Sleeve echoed me. There was movement in the rear of the workshop, a crash and a jangling. 2 golden eyes blinked at me in a wreckage of plate metal and gears which had been her camouflage. "I am not supposed to come out when company is present," the creature said uncertainly, all metal and whirling clock hands. "There is no one here to call us company or make tea." "Mother is out," the glittering woman said. "You can answer our question just as well," cried Sleeve, delighted, introducing the woman as Our, who had spider silk in her joints. "What is it that girls do in the way that spiders weave?" Our seemed to consider it, wringing her metal hands. "I do not know," she answered after a long pause. "Well, what do you suspect?" I encouraged. The woman looked wretched as a face made out of broken clocks and breastplates can look. "I suspect," she worded tentatively, "that they live in castles. Beyond that, it is difficult to say." "A bell tower is like a castle," I said. Sleeve rolled her eyes. "I am sorry, but it is not," said the ticking woman. "It does not have a prince inside or outside, and there is no portcullis or moat or chapel. Many castles have towers, but a tower is not a castle all by itself." "I'm sure I do not wish to live in a castle, then. It sounds vile," I answered. "What in the world is a prince?" Our brightened. "If you would like to know, I can explain about primogeniture and patriarchal descent systems," she said eagerly. "There are no castles handy," chirped Sleeve hurriedly. "So I think we shall have to seek elsewhere. Do not worry. At least you will not have to ask the squid. They are ghastly." "I am sorry," said the machine, slumping at the shoulders. "I will try to have the right answer if you come back later." I put my hand on the creature's shoulder. "It's all right. I don't know either. But spiders are funny and determined things. Must be treated carefully." "Yes," Our said. "It is the same with clocks." We left the strange little shop, and Sleeve seemed glad to be away. She took me next up to the high, windy peak of the highest tower in the city. "Is this a castle?" I asked. "Certainly not," puffed the spider. "And that is how I met the sirens. were frightening as fire unchecked, but pretty enough to make me bashful. They nuzzled sleeve in a very unbird-like fashion, their women's legs pointing and skipping in joy. My old friends, you must help me. Tell me what it is a girl does in the way a spider weaves, so that Solace will not grow up to be the wrong sort of girl. We like the wrong sorts of girls, they wrote. They are usually the ones worth writing about. Please, Sleeve sighed, you needn't be such a bunch of silly, flea-bitten birds for my benefit. Oh, a firebird anyway, I grumbled under my breath. We think, went their flowing feet, the dancing penmanship, that girls ought to sing. They ought to sing and dance while they're singing. But we are not girls, and so can be almost certain that we know nothing about the matter. But we let you try, so why not her? The sisters seized me with their wings. Theirs were cool and dry. Not like Papa's, but a wing is the right sort of thing, that I knew. Everything good in the world has feathers and wings and claws. They led me to the inkwash and passed my feet through, and then began to whirl me between them. It was a mess of legs and wings and beaks, but slowly it became a dance. They lifted my feet with deftly turned ankles, moved my arms in time with their wings. We danced together, the sirens and I. But they never sang, not once, and I spun with them in silence, faster and faster and faster. When it was over, the four of us looked down at the paper floor, the expanse of swirling ink, trying to read the tale we had written there. Something lovely, I hoped, with no castles and a great many birds. The tale our feet had dragged behind us in our swift, complicated dance. There was a scribble, and a scrawl, and a jagged mess. The sisters had managed a few words here and there, but in their instruction they could not manage both the steps and the tale. There was nothing of note. They leapt up again and fluttered to a fresh corner. You are hopeless at letters, they wrote. That is very sad. But the dancing, I cried. The dancing. I want to dance like that. Try the dancing, master, they suggested with a flourish. We only know how to dance with each other, how to dance the letters. We suspect perhaps one ought only to dance with one's sisters. Sleep sighed. Her poor needle legs were so tired of walking. But she was determined, more determined certainly than I, who after all had little interest in the fates of girls. We wound down from the sirens and into the streets again, the winding circular streets of my home. This time she led me down the tight, thin alleys and down streets wider than lanterns' wings. But we went up no hills, turning and twisting to remain pointed downward until we came to a little grating in a high wall, the side, I thought, of the opera house, which even the opera singers barely used any more, since they now had the whole city happy to stand in for any courts of intrigue or enchanted pastorals they could dream of. It was nearly dark by the time we found it. The grate was small, and it led into a darkness without depth. But I was little then. I could wriggle through the bars, and the darkness was darkness and could not hurt me. Lantern taught me that, blazing as he did, against the fears of any crawling shadow. And we will pick up there next week with the tail end of that and the tail beginning of the next. Indeed, a tale with no castles at all and plenty of birds. Yeah, I feel like I'm constantly apologizing for how apparently obsessed with birds I am. I don't really know what my problem is. I don't know what it was then. I don't know what it is now, because it's not like I've stopped writing about birds. Oh well. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask? Is Solace the character based on S.J. Tucker? Not completely. Definitely the S.J. spins fire, and there are things that are coming that are definitely based on S.J. But Solace herself, not quite. But everybody is inspired by various people. Was there some inspiration in there? Yeah, absolutely. Like everybody in my life ends up in a book sooner or later. It's very true. Is there any character more based on SJ than Solace? No, absolutely not. There's definitely a lot of Tucker DNA in there. Do I do any calligraphy? I did when I was younger. I did quite a bit of it. I think I talked about this before, that I did English calligraphy, and then I majored in classics, so I had to learn to write in Greek, which is why my personal handwriting is a hot mess of different styles. It's very pretty. I don't say that arrogantly. I say it because people comment on how pretty it is all the time. They do not comment on how legible it is. It is quite pretty and quite different than most people's handwriting, because it's got a bunch of Greek nonsense in it that really probably shouldn't have stuck around in my English handwriting, but I was a very affected young woman at 22 and I refused to give it up. Solace is a lovely girl. I mean, I can't really, I don't want to spoil things for people, but Solace is definitely... I had a very difficult childhood, and so have other characters in this book. And Solace is sort of the one that didn't have to go through all that. What so many of the people in this book would have been if they had had loving parents and a place to call home, and not trauma in their youths. And so she is a beautiful cinnamon roll, too good for this world, which is why she can never be fully based on anyone in the real world, because everyone has trauma. And her biggest trauma is finding out she's not a Firebird so far. But she's a wonderful person, and I love her as a character. I went through a Viking rune phase in school as well. I am that girl, always have been, probably always will be at this point. It is what it is. But definitely a bunch of the Carnival of the Dawn stuff was inspired by the community that I kind of found with SJ on tour with all of the fire spinners and the sort of traveling spontaneous carnival anytime, no waiting, that she was part of and I got to be part of briefly. Someone said, I'm glad people go through those phases. Kids preserve a lot of things with their tenacious hobbies. We do. What we hold with us from childhood is what makes our entire adulthood. So I'm not sorry, or I'd fix it. I, unlike a lot of people in 2020, actually do have to write things longhand with a fair frequency. And when I'm doing book signings and things, I'm writing more longhand than most people ever do anymore. So I have every opportunity to change my handwriting if I wanted to, and I do not want to. So my handwriting remains pretty much as it has been since I was 22 or 23. Anybody else? Well, get the outro out of the way. If you have other questions, you can pop them up into the chat. As always, this has not been an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales, but it has been a play. You can get music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can find copies of them at any of your local independent booksellers. Mine is printbookstore.com. You can find me howling into darkness and summoning the wolves of a new decade at Catherynne Valente on Twitter. You can find me on Patreon with lots of good stuff coming in the next week, including the first chapter of the space opera sequel at Cat Valente as well. You can catch up in the archive at Cat Valente Live, and if you are so moved to toss a coin to your witch, there is a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website, which is catherinevalente.com. These are free readings, but if you are moved to toss a coin there, it is deeply appreciated by a house that is nothing but freelancers and holding on through COVID. So I will thank anybody who tips me on the next stream by name. No questions, just love this part of the book. It's definitely sort of hurtles along from here on, and there's a lot more happiness in this part of the book than there is in the first half of this thing, which was a bit grim to go through. I'm so glad that space opera helped you out. There are a lot of things in space opera that's it's kind of crazy I didn't write it in 2020. I guess that its best destiny was to help some people through the pandemic, so I hope that it does. And if you're watching this, it is, in fact, $1.99 on Amazon for the month of October, so you can read Space Opera, my glittery madness comedy tribute to Eurovision and Douglas Adams, for way less than a cup of coffee. Way less. It's less even than like a small cup of black coffee. So hurry out and grab that. Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions, do I remember anything in particular about that part? I don't really. I really wanted to have Lantern's parenting obsession be, I wanted to have a male character who wanted to be a parent, which is still pretty unusual in books, and I wanted to have a non-biological child, and show this wonderful parental relationship. There are so many families with unusual shapes out there. I wanted to give this entirely healthy, lovely father-daughter relationship to those families to find in fairy tales and archetypes. Did I at the time really wish I had a better relationship with my father? I totally did. Do I have a much better relationship with my father now? I absolutely do. Miracles do happen. That was kind of the whole idea of Lantern and Solace's relationship. So I hope that comes across. But yeah, the Firebirds definitely light up the last half of this book. So we've got less than 100 pages, about 90 pages left now. So we'll try and aim that toward finishing around Halloween, and have a little Halloween party here on Instagram Live in our lonely, lonely pandemic lives where we're not allowed to have physical friends. Yay! Cheers! Cheerful. No. I love you all. I will see you on Wednesday. Does it even matter what day it is anymore? God, probably the only reason I know what day it is because if it's Wednesday or Sunday, I'm here with you. I will see you on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Same fairy tale time. Same fairy tale channel. Love you all.